So thanks for that question on the key priorities for the Commission on 5G. A few things spring to mind. So the first is radio spectrum. There's clearly been a lot of progress on radio spectrum, as we've heard at the conference over the past couple of days. But there's also more to do, and it's encouraging to see the discussions which have been going on about things like WRC 23. I think the second one is a much more practical one in terms of 5G. We're getting to the stage now where 5G is becoming a reality. We are starting to see 5G deployments, but I think there's a lot more still to do in terms of understanding what the environment is for the deployment of 5G infrastructure, how we deal with things like network sharing, how we deal with things like the deployment of small cells, and also all of the backhaul and the requirement for fibre that sits with that. Another thing I think to think about is 5G is a much broader ecosystem than we've seen with the Gs that have gone before. There's a lot more integration to do around the ecosystem. We hear a lot being said about slicing for providing services for vertical industries and so on. I think we're really just at the very start of that, and I think anything that can be done around that in terms of encouraging the ecosystems, looking at the industrial strategy and so on that needs to sit behind it, is something that I'd very strongly encourage the European Commission to look at. So on security challenges for 5G, I think the first one is really just the complexity of 5G compared to anything we've seen before. The ecosystem itself is much more complex. There's going to be a lot more software involved in the ecosystem. The ecosystem will also be more dynamic, so you will see AI, for example, being used to do things like updates within the system. There's a lot of issues that come out there in terms of resilience, verification and security. And I think the first thing that is a real requirement, I think, for, across operators, across national governments, but also for the EU as a whole, is the coordination mechanisms to make sure that where there are threats, responses can be delivered across the European Union if necessary. And it's encouraging to see some of the things with the toolbox and ENISA and the other activities which are going on in this respect. So I think what I would say there is actually keep up what you're already doing and look to see where the further opportunities for cooperation there are in that, in terms of knowledge sharing, developing the skills which are required to deal with the security threats, understanding how the boundaries with national competence work, because of course security, and particularly national security, is a matter for national competence, and it is one that's got to be handled carefully, I think, by all the parties who are involved. My view on the value of multi-stakeholder events is they're firstly a fantastic opportunity for information sharing and for discussion among many of the parties who are involved in the development of things like 5G. So it just provides a fantastic opportunity for people to get together. It also provides, for people like me, the opportunity to meet with some of the real influencers who are involved in the discussions. So the discussions we've had at the conference here this morning, for example, on WRC 1923 and also potentially WRC 2027. Just getting to sort of talk to the people who are involved in those things is of great value. I think the other thing with a series of conferences like this that run over time is they help with the development of the consistency of views that one needs to develop in an industry like this. So I think this fits very well with many of the other perhaps more formal fora that exist for this sort of thing.